Welcome, everybody. Hello, and thank you for being here on Spirit Matters. We're tuning in live from New York at the Bhakti Center. Kishore and I are live at the Bhakti Center today, and Achita Gopi's holding it down in Queens. This is Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast. I am Dayal here with Kishore and Achita, and we are ready to send you off on your morning, afternoon, evening. Somebody. It's Kristen, yeah, because she's in the Philippines. She tunes in at night. It's 12 hours opposite clock for her. So this is her nightly before she goes to bed thing. Somebody found me on Instagram and said, I've been following you for a while. I didn't know that you had a podcast. And I was like, which podcast? Because during the pandemic, we all started multiple podcasts.
Right.
And I was like, the Spirit Matters one, that's the only one I'm still doing. And she's like, I got to go back and binge watch all the episodes on YouTube. And I was like, people are binging us.
Woohoo!
Okay. So we're here to keep you going throughout the day, keep us going. How you doing, Achita? How you doing, Kishore?
I'm good. No complaints.
No complaints. Kishore?
I've got a lot of complaints.
Got a lot of complaints.
But I'm not going to say them.
They're not welcome here. Yeah. Everyone's like, I can't complain because they won't let me. How you doing? I can't complain because they won't let me. We've been reading from the Journey Within here. We started that yesterday, and little excerpts here to give us a little spiritual grounding in our conversation. So I opened up the book here, and I found this section. It's preceding the section that Kishore read for us yesterday about having patience with wisdom. This section is on page 145 of the book. These are all short sections. It's called The Essence of Spiritual Community. I am the servant of the servant. Not a mentality we usually bring into our Western lives. He reads, the Gita, chapter 6, verse 9, tells us that advanced spiritualists regard, quote, honest well-wishers, affectionate benefactors, the neutral, the envious, friends and enemies, the pious and the materialists, all with an equal mind. Relationships, like life, are full of complexities. For our practice, it's good to develop an equal, balanced mind when dealing with others. As servants of the Supreme, we are servants of each other. Sri Chaitanya taught a beautiful meditation. Think of yourself as a humble servant of the servant of the servant of God's servants. He taught that we should be, quote, humbler than a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree, end quote. Humility, tolerance, patience. Choosing these over ego when dealing with others helps us and pleases God, the Supreme Father, because any parent is pleased to see his or her children getting along. But getting along takes sacrifice. The word sacrifice has a number of definitions, but in the context of love, we take the definition to make sacred. And we do this by centering our relationships on mutual spiritual interests. When spiritual ideas form the foundation of a relationship, the relationship can survive whatever challenges may arise. The more we strive to improve ourselves spiritually and support our friends in doing the same, the more our relationships rise to a level beyond the reach of superficial disagreements and ego-driven agitation. The surface of a river changes with every breeze, but if we dive deep enough below the water's surface, we'll find a place of calm.
Super gorgeous. Also, because life is what it is and there's like tricks of light happening, it really actually looks like this book is illuminating with knowledge. Like the sun is like reflecting off the pages of this book. See if I move it?
It feels like a gem.
No
Like
longer illuminated.
you're watching the YouTube video, you can see. Yeah. Oh.
Super good.
Um, I the immediate thought that came to my mind of a number of things, just like immediately just shot very personally. Um, Talking about spiritual when spiritual ideas form the foundation of a relationship, the relationship can survive whatever challenges may arise. And I was thinking that in the context of how relationships are modeled for us today and um, the way that we have an opportunity to do things differently. And sometimes it can be really hard if healthy working models of relationship haven't been demonstrated for us, or we look at our history or our past, or look at our upbringing. I'm reading this biography. I think I referenced it before. I'm reading this biography of Brandy Carlisle, who's a singer-songwriter, and talking about her upbringing. I think in Washington State or something. Just rugged upbringing, just like alcohol and kind of just like just rugged upbringing. And I think it's something that a lot of people can resonate with, whether you come from broken families or you come from divorced homes or you come from. I had somebody reached out to me, a stepbrother of mine that I probably haven't seen in 30 years, found my sister and then found me and was like, "Hey, how's it going?" Like my father was married. My father married 4 times before he died when he was 49. And he married and divorced the same woman twice, who was also an alcoholic. Like married, divorced, let's try it again, married, didn't work out, divorced, then moved to Northern California. So that woman had 2 children, 2 sons, of roughly around the age of my sister and I. And so for about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years of my childhood, I had 2 stepbrothers. And then, of course, my dad divorced, and then he moved upstate Northern California. I lived in Southern California, and then we never saw them again. So it wasn't like they continued into our lives. It was just like 5 years of my life. Every other weekend, we'd ride bikes together or whatever. And so that was just it was just, and my sister and I were talking. I was like, yeah, I was like, wow, this person was such a part of our lives, but then we haven't probably seen them in like 30 years. And then the first thought was like, I'm getting old. Anybody I haven't seen in 30 years, I never thought I'd say that. Um, but even my own life, my both of my parents divorcing and then getting into relationships where, people I talk to, most people I know, their parents are either not together or they're together but shouldn't be. That's not for everybody. It's not for everybody, but a lot of people. And then we think about entering into relationships in our own life, and it's like, can I really do it? Given who I am, given my background, given what I've seen modeled for me, given my own past and my history, like, what's the point? And I think you see a lot of it today. A lot of people don't get married, or a lot of people, avoid long-term relationships, or it's just a hard thing to look at coming from where we're coming from. And I think that what I just read here was hope, the idea that we can do things differently. And he was saying that centering our relationships on mutual spiritual interest, and the more we strive to improve ourselves spiritually and support our friends in doing the same, the more our relationships rise to a level beyond the reach of superficial disagreements and ego-driven agitation. And so, yeah, I was just kind of speaking to that experience in my life, to people that I know. I think a common experience of people wondering, can I avoid the pitfalls of my predecessors, and just taking the tools that we have that actually we can do things differently. And I think that hope and belief is really, really important. I think that the spiritual tools we've been given allow us to do that. And so that was my initial kind of reflection on what I was reading.
I think you're absolutely right. And it does make us really think about relationships, the nature of relationships, how relationships morph and change. And then
Mm,
the actual the goal or the function of relationships in our spiritual lives. And I feel as though that one beautiful, beautiful statement, like sacrifice doesn't just mean austere, throw this away, I'm doing without, to
Mm,
make sacred. Like these relationships are there to be made sacred and to make our lives sacred,
mm,
which is something that we don't normally look at in terms of relationships, especially within this sect of bhakti.
mm,
I feel like relationships, especially between partners, get a bad rap, you know, and it's kind of like these relationships are there to somehow further you toward Krishna, but don't actually look at the other person as a person.
mm,
Like they're just the vehicle for either like making children or furthering your monk mentality.
mm,
And so even at Johnavi's wedding, her father was saying, and he said that he actually says this in a lot of weddings. He did my nephew's wedding and he said it there too. He said, we see a lot of people entering householder life, but still having a monk-like mentality.
mm,
And we don't want that. It's difficult for the two to coexist. And I feel as though that was a mentality that was kind of really, really fostered
mm,
a lot in the early years of this Hare Krishna movement, this bhakti movement of, okay, you two are in a relationship, your husband and wife, and there are like weird culty horror stories of like the beginnings of this bhakti movement where even before you wanted to have a child, the people would have to like chant 50 rounds, but you don't stay in the same rooms. Sometimes you don't even stay in the same places. And then there are some like way off the grid temple communities where they're like, you know, they'd have a trailer where like the married couple would go to try and conceive this child. And I'm like, what? Why are we weird? Why are we so weird? First of all, a trailer, and then everybody knows, like, it's just the most strange, like, can't we be normal about this?
mm,
And I remember talking to a friend of mine, and I was saying, I was like, maybe the way we look at relationships and marriages and all of these things is not exactly the way it is in Goloka Vrindavan. I was like, I mean, you know, after all, everybody's supposed to love Krishna, right? And my friend said, yeah, of course. And I said, but also Krishna has an unlimited amount of like cowherd friends, both boys and girls. And they said, yeah. And I said, how do we think they got there?
mm,
Like relationships are such an integral part of our spiritual lives. These children that were the products of loving relationships all throughout Vrindavan were the children that become Krishna's best friends.
mm,
So that's a service. But us loving each other, loving one another is equally a service. It has to be. And this act of making these relationships sacred, I think, has to be taken into account as part of the humility, as part of the
mm,
tolerance, as part of the servant of the servant of the servant, as part of all of these things. It can't just be monastic life. Otherwise, how does the world continue to go on? And I
mm,
feel like there's not enough credit being given to us loving one another as parts and parcels of Krishna.
mm. He mentions beautifully also in the actual read, as servants of the Supreme, we are servants of each other. Mm, yeah.
I I'm glad that you all are very hopeful. I'm also very hopeful. I'm hopeful, but I tend to be very realistic, almost sometimes painfully realistic about these things. And I really appreciated that in when he was writing, when Maharaj was writing, he gave this example of like a mother always likes to see her kids getting along or something like that. And then I can't remember verbatim what he said because I don't have the book in front of me, but he said, but getting along takes work, or getting along is a sacrifice. But getting along, I can't remember word for word what he said. And for me, that just like hit me very hard because I think that I think that people know that on a, you know, we've all heard it before. Relationships take work. Like we've all heard that before, but I don't think that we sometimes are ready, maybe because we don't have the training, the proper training, both from a societal level or even in spiritual communities, like what Pachita Gopi was speaking about, being weird about this kind of stuff. And in secular society, just like, you know, the examples that we have nowadays are not great. And even when I was growing up, I also feel old. I was I was talking to someone, this is totally a tangent. I was talking to someone who was trying to like explain to me like that this verbiage is like something that the kids are saying nowadays. And I was like, oh, it's like I guess I'm not a kid anymore. I guess I'm an adult. But yeah, we don't have these examples. And therefore we've all heard this, that relationships take work, etc. But I think the actual action of doing the work that it takes to be in relationships, whether they be paternal relationships or fraternal relationships or loving, you know, partner, romantic relationships or whatever relationship it might be, just that day-to-day work that it takes is, you know, there's a lot of maintenance that goes into it. There's a lot of like problem solving and crisis control and all types of different types of work that go into these relationships. And I think just looking, you know, you were mentioning this, Dayal, just looking at like, you know, current modern age, contemporary, secular, whatever, it's like a lot of people avoid these kinds of things, you know. It's like the moment something gets hard, it's like, I'm out. You know, the moment you see something that I don't know, doesn't vibe with you or doesn't this or doesn't that, it's just like, I'm out of here. I'm not dealing with this. Going back to the apps. And I think that there's definitely, because we were speaking yesterday about, and I was thinking about this too, in the passage we were reading yesterday, Maharaj was saying, you know, we can't just stand by when we're seeing like an injustice go by and this and etc. So I do agree that there are like severe situations in relationships and all types of relationships where you have to like be extremely clear about your boundaries. I'm very like that. I'm extremely like that with my boundaries, especially with my family. And but I also agree that there is hope, and I also agree that things can get better. However, like Maharaj is saying, getting along takes it's work. It takes sacrifice, and it can't just be one-sided. That's definitely a realization that I'm understanding. It can't just be like, I'm serving you, you're my parent, I'm serving you, I'm serving you, I'm serving you, I'm serving you, you know. And if something's not, you know, because it's we're supposed to have that mood towards you, whoever that person is, and they're also supposed to have that mood. We're supposed to be serving each other. And so if it's a one-sided situation, it's not going to be pretty, and we're going to get, you know, resentful. You were talking about this morning, Dayal gave class at the Bhakti Center. You're talking about resentment, and I feel like when you are serving and serving and serving and serving, but it's a one-way street, and it's something that you feel like you're not getting a reciprocation of love from whatever relationship that it might be, you know, resentment can start to brew in the heart. And I think that's really crappy. And usually, last thing I'll say, usually when resentment brews in the heart, it drives you away from hope. It drives you into nihilism. It drives you into like, this isn't going to work, you know, or like, what's the point of all this anyway? Or these kinds of thoughts.
Yeah, the thing I was hearing that I appreciated a lot is purpose. And I think a lot of times we enter relationships without understanding personally what we're looking to get out of a relationship. You know, I know so many people, and I do coaching or counseling or whatever, and a lot of things people are working on. I want to find a partner, you know, and I just always ask, and I just say, why? You know, because there's generally an underlying assumption that I don't believe that anybody wants a partner. That's not what anybody wants. They want what they think they're going to get from that partner. I want connection. I want happiness. I want companionship. I want spiritual support. I want whatever it might be. And then we think, okay, well, it's good to know that. And then you realize, okay, is a relationship necessarily going to give that to me? Because then so many people end up in relationships and they're not fulfilled. It's like, why am I not fulfilled? In general, it's because I didn't clarify what I was wanting from a relationship, and then assessing, is this relationship going to give that to me? There's just this, we oftentimes are wandering through life trying to fill our needs without even being aware of what they are and whether or not the things we're doing are going to fill them for us or not. And so I think that if we just get really clear on the purpose of relationship, what I'm looking for, and what I was hearing here in the journey within is that on mutual spiritual interests, you know, meaning um, I am I have my own spiritual interests and needs, and I realize I need a partner. I need companionship. I need support. I recognize that. And also I recognize that you need the same. And how am I able to fulfill that role in your life? Like I'm signing up as a support system or structure in your life. And really recognizing that. And I think that there's usually an assumption that a relationship is going to make me happy or fill the hole in my heart or complete me or make me, I'm going to feel connected just because I have a partner. Saying I do doesn't mean you're connected now. It just means that there's a person legally binded to you, or that there's a person living in your home, or that, you know. And so I think that just yeah, and that's personal work. That's the personal work we have to do. And then we find whether or not that sometimes, regardless of whether I enter into a relationship or not, I might be able to find what I'm looking for regardless, or it at least helps me navigate what types of relationships I want to engage in or not, and to avoid the negative types of behavior or influences or red flags, etc., that I might normally accept, because I'm just clear what I'm looking for and why I'm looking for it. And that generally weeds out 80% of yeah, the problems that we find ourselves in.
I kind of want to speak to, and I've been kind of wondering how to like formulate the
Mm,
idea, and then Martha really put it really nicely, kind of what I want to speak to in the comments. There's a very fine line between giving up in a relationship and knowing when to honestly walk away for whatever reasons we might have, for the sake of both people.
mm,
And I've been really kind of wanting to speak about this idea of relationship success and failure. And Kishore, you kind of brought it up a little bit, talking about, we don't have these models in modern day relationship models and experiences. And I kind of feel like, is that true? Did we ever? We it seems like there's been this stamp put on it where you are successful if, like my parents, you've been married for 56 years.
mm,
You are a failure if, like me, you find yourself newly single after a 10-year marriage. And
mm,
I'm kind of like, is that a failure?
mm,
Is 56 years successful? Or is it the way that they've been able to work with one another throughout life, the success? And is the acknowledgement of, okay, we don't need to be romantically involved, but we'll always be family, success regardless of what the conventional label is put on it? Because Ram decided to take a vow to have one wife. He said, I'm just going to have Sita as one wife. And that was abnormal. That was kind of weird and abnormal for kings back then. And so that's why I'm like, the idea of marriage was so different. We think, oh, Vedically, you never separate, you never do any of these things, blah 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 blah. But also Vedically, what would happen was, if things weren't working out, they got another wife. So,
not
and up,
recommended necessarily
right,
by
like, and
this
up into
podcast.
like, right, so, and up into like the thousands of wives.
Honey, I just heard on Spirit Matters there's another solution to our problems.
And so, like, but there were still relationship issues. There were still going to be relationship problems. And so just the hallmark of, this is success and this is failure. I think in the material world, we have to be so flexible with that idea and really
Mm,
look at the principles of it. How
yeah.
are we dealing with each other on a day-to-day basis? Are we dealing respectfully with one another regardless of what the label is? Or are we sticking with
Mm,
this label and we're treating each other like crap, but we stuck with the label, so that's success?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love the idea of you mentioned, and again, it goes back to purpose of like, how am I defining success? Is success just staying together? And I will always, and we got to wrap up here, so I'll share this, and then we can get some takeaways. But always remember, I heard Glennon Doyle speak live in Brooklyn. Maybe this was 2018 or something like that. And I think, I don't know if I think I may have already shared this at one point, but anyway, I'll share it again. And she had just come out with her second book, Love Warrior, where she details the kind of deconstruction of her marriage. Um, and somebody basically, long story short, came up to her and said, "I'm so sorry that your marriage failed." And she really like held on to that word and like defining failure. And she was like, she gave the example of flowers, that there's perennials and there's annuals, that some flowers are meant to bloom only once. They bloom and then that's it. No matter how much sunshine and water and soil you pour into it, it's done. It's served. And it's not a failed flower. It bloomed, it came for a purpose, and now it's done. And some flowers, they bloom every season, with springtime here in New York. And so things are blooming and there's cherry blossoms and there's greenery. And it's like, and when the winter comes, it'll go dormant and it'll get dry and it'll just be sticks on the trees. But it's meant to bloom again. And knowing sometimes which one our relationships are is really important. And so she says that whenever a relationship, quote unquote, ends, it doesn't mean it's a failure. She uses the word complete. It's now complete. Like it's ran its cycle, it served its purpose, and now it's complete. Just like the blooming cycle of a flower that only blooms once in its lifetime is complete. You don't think, oh, after one flower blooms, then that flower is such a failure. You're like, no, it's complete, and you appreciate its beauty for what it was. And so, I really appreciated that concept of defining success and understanding the purpose things have in our life, and it's very, very circumstantial. I think it was even yesterday we were reading in terms of be patient and wait. Was it? Yeah, it was. To apply, I mean, this is a little bit different, but yesterday, to apply the balance between justice and compassion requires spiritual maturity and attention to the particulars of a situation. So I think in anything, it requires spiritual maturity and attention to the particulars of a situation. All right, we're already at time, and I had the last word. I'm sorry, but we'd love to hear from Kimberly. What do you got for us, Kimberly? Kimberly's our queen takeawayer, writing notes for us, and then I want to hear from Kishore and Achuta, where you're walking away from.
All right, so our takeaways today was the idea of modeling healthy relationships and defining like failure versus success in these relationships, and that relationships are sacred, but it also takes work. And we need to get clear on our purpose and what we're looking for in these relationships.
Hmm.
And also the idea of how it's important to center our relationships on mutual spiritual interests and then supporting each other with that.
Hmm. Thank you, Kimberly. I would love to hear takeaway from Achuta and Kishore if you have something. Otherwise, I have a question that I could ask. We could end on. But if you guys have something you want to say other than answering my question, just say what you said, and I'll save it for tomorrow. You
Ask
guys,
the question.
I want to ask a question. How do you define success in a relationship? You each have 10 seconds.
I really do define success on how we're treating each other. I always said, I was like, if I have a kid, I just want my kid to grow up not needing therapy from being my kid.
Hmm.
And so really looking at how I treat her father, and from that perspective of like, okay, what is she witnessing? That to me kind of determined the success or failure of a relationship, or any relationship for that matter. I kind of feel like, can I go to my Guru Maharaj and say, you know what, no matter what, I handled, or I tried to handle this with the most respect, and with the idea that you'd be proud of me watching these interactions, whether they continue for forever or they continue for a year.
Hmm.
So for me, it's really about how we're treating each other. Are we able to talk with, like, can we address each other with respect? Are we getting into name calling and all that? Because then otherwise, I'm like, then we need to change up the dynamic.
Hmm. There's a cartoon meme that floats around in very different variations, and two, it's a couple, and they're pushing a stroller with a kid, and the couple, they are yelling at each other. One is saying, "You're messed up," and then was like, "No, you're so messed up." And it's like labeling, and then like there's a label on the baby that says a whole new kind of messed up. And so I appreciate your saying that success is just how we treat each other. Yeah, thank you. Sure.
I agree with Achyuta. It's how we treat each other. And for some reason, the word that's coming to my mind is forgiveness. And I feel like so much of how we deal, forgiveness and grace, I think, like so much of how we deal with our relationships, I think needs such an element of grace. Like, have I kept my dignity intact? Or did I go to like dark places, you know? And so I think forgiveness of the other person and also of yourself is really important. And I think it's hard to define success in like one thing, but I agree with Achyuta. It's definitely in how we treat each other for sure. But also how we're able to kind of just you know, so that the heart doesn't become bitter. If my heart is bitter, then I know I've failed. Like on that, I'll call it a failure for sure.
Yeah, I'm just gonna echo what you guys said. I love how you mentioned how we treat each other, and I think Kishore, yeah, like if my heart is bitter, then yeah, that, I mean, in some ways that's on me, you know, no matter what had happened to me, however I'm treated, if my heart has become bitter, and because you were taking Achyuta how we treat each other, and I was taking it a step further for myself as how we respect or feel towards each other. Like if there's bitterness, even if you're together, then that is something to be looked at. And even if there's a distance created in the relationship, but there's like respect and well treatment, then, you know, that's something successful and beautiful. And so I think it does really boil down to how I'm growing as a person and how I allow myself to harbor positive or negative feelings or respect towards another person. I know it was a loaded question, but I just felt like I wanted to land on that. Thank you guys so much for being here with us. We keep it short and sweet here, and I feel like we were just getting started. Lots to unpack, but grateful for all of you guys. Glad that you guys are here. Please be well, take care, and we'll be back again tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.